Welcome back to the Deer Show. Before we get to today's controversial subject about Trump and Hitler and Bill Maher and Larry David, I want to talk about tomorrow's show. Tomorrow, I'm going to give you the definitive legal analysis of the lawsuits that are going on between the Trump administration and places like Harvard, soon to be joined by many other universities as well. I've just agreed to write a new book on that subject. I don't have a title yet. One title is a simple one: defund anti-Semitic universities. Another one, a little bit, a little bit more erotic, is Harvard: defend or defund. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the legal basis for Harvard's lawsuit against the Trump administration. We'll talk about the Trump administration's legal basis for cutting back on funding of a university that has a $53 billion endowment, and is claiming to let its animals that are being experimented on die because they don't have enough money to pay for grain for the rabbits. $12, $13. They can't dip into their endowment. Well, who can be more qualified to talk about that than somebody who's been on the Harvard faculty for 60 years and knows the insides, knew every college Harvard president and dean since 1964. So you're going to get the hard truth from me on what's really going on and what Harvard is doing, and whether it's really going to go forward with his lawsuit or whether it's going to compromise. I think you'll learn a lot. In the meantime, today, before we get to our subject, you saw that Sarah Palin lost her lawsuit. I wasn't surprised. It was always a hard lawsuit for her to win. She brought a lawsuit against the New York Times, and it was thrown out, and it was reinstated. Today, a jury ruled against her. Not surprising under existing law, because what the Times basically said was largely a matter of opinion. Was there a relationship between, her targeting and putting up a bullseye and that the person being shot? And also the Times apologized and retracted it. So it's not surprising. But one of these days I'll do a show on what the First Amendment should be saying in relation to very, very partisan media like the New York Times and CNN. As many of you know, I'm suing CNN still. The case is still pending. We haven't heard a result yet from the Court of Appeals. They put in my mouth exactly the opposite of what I said when I defended Donald Trump. Now it's 5 years ago, in his first, I think it's more than 5 years. In his first impeachment, they attacked me for saying a president can commit any crimes, when the whole thesis of my argument was that president, if he commits a crime, treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors, can't be impeached. So we'll get to that issue as well. But I love comedy. And I love Bill Maher. I used to like Larry David when he was funny, but he's no longer funny, Larry, now. Like so many other left-wing comedians, doesn't go for the laughs, he goes for the claps. And what are the claps? The claps are just, hey, we approve of your partisanship and what you're saying, so we're going to clap at you. We're not going to laugh at you, because laughing comes from internally. It comes from inside. If you say something funny, I laugh. If you see something I approve of, I clap. Clapping is obviously not an emotional reaction. It's a calculated reaction. If I like what you're saying, I'm going to clap. If I don't like you're saying, I'll either be silent or maybe I'll boo. But a laugh is different. I mean, you can't control a laugh. If something's really, really funny, you watch, Groucho Marx, Jack Benny. I know I'm showing my age. You can't help but laughing. It's just hysterical. It's so funny and so clever. When's the last time you heard a clever joke, clever comedy? Well, you're certainly not going to hear it from Larry David. So here's the story. So we all get it straight. We know that Bill Maher had dinner with Donald Trump. I've had dinner with Donald Trump. I sat on Lincoln's bed in the Lincoln bedroom with Donald Trump, talking about the world situation. I've had dinner with him in the upstairs dining room of the White House. I've had dinner with him in the adjoining little dining room next to the Oval Office. I've had dinner with him in his hotel in Mar-a-Lago. I've had dinner with him in his hotel in New Jersey. I've had dinner with him lots and lots of times, and he's an interesting guy to have dinner with. Who wouldn't want to have dinner with the president of the United States and talk about tariffs and talk about China and talk about Iran? Of course, you don't want to have dinner with the president. I've had dinner with I've had dinner with Bill Clinton numerous times. I've had dinner with Barack Obama, and I expect to have dinner with future presidents if I live so long and still am acceptable as a dinner companion. But Larry David didn't like the fact that Bill Maher, who's really a funny comedian, really funny, he gets the clap sometimes too, but he also gets really good belly laughs. Larry David didn't like the fact that Bill Maher had dinner with Donald Trump, just like he didn't like the fact that I went in front of the United States Senate and defended the constitutional rights of the President of the United States and of the presidency. And in my case, what Larry David did is he screamed at me, saw me in Chilmark on Martha's Vineyard, and he called me disgusting and disgraceful and said he would never talk to me because I defended the President of the United States. Well, what he did to Bill Maher is he wrote a column. And in the column, he compares, in a very unfunny way, but he compares Bill Maher having dinner with Donald Trump with Larry David having dinner with Adolf Hitler. Now, the Times generally has a policy of not comparing anybody to Hitler. And, talk about, being unique in history. I mean, nobody is totally unique, but Hitler comes as close as you can to being uniquely evil in history. He after all, he brought millions of Jews from all over the world into death camps in Auschwitz and other places in order to gas them to death, murder their babies, murder 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds in their mother's arms, smash the heads of babies. Nobody in history has ever done quite what Adolf Hitler did to the Jewish people. Larry David's Jewish, but he's a self-hating Jew. And so he compares Hitler with Donald Trump. Now, when you compare Hitler to Donald Trump, you know what you're doing? You're denying the Holocaust. What do you mean you're denying the Holocaust? Larry David didn't deny the Holocaust. Yes, he did. When you make a comparison between Hitler, who had death camps and who lined people up in front of graves and killed them in cold blood, who murdered 6 million, maybe more, only 6 million Jews, probably millions more of people, Polish people, other people, Romani people, etc. When you compare Hitler to Donald Trump, what you're saying is, well, Donald Trump must have a hidden death camp somewhere. There must be gas chambers because otherwise there's no comparison. Either what you're saying is Donald Trump has gas chambers or Hitler didn't have gas chambers, because you can't compare the two of them by leaving out gas chambers. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you enjoy the theater? There are certain things that are pretty essential. Hitler without gas chambers isn't Hitler. Hitler without Einsatzgruppen it's not Hitler. So if you're talking about Hitler, you're talking about gas chambers. If you're talking about Trump, what are you talking about? You're talking about deporting some people who have no status in the United States and who can go to the Supreme Court and get relief. When's the last time one of Hitler's victims was able to go to the German courts and get relief? So there's no comparison. And if you think there is a comparison, the only way you can think there's a comparison is if you really think, the crimes of Hitler are exaggerated. They're just like the alleged crimes of Donald Trump. And there are some people who say that. There are Holocaust deniers out there. There are people who've been sued. There have been others. But Larry David, to become a Holocaust denier, to become somebody who minimizes the Holocaust by comparing, and now you might say, I'm taking it too seriously. It's a joke. It's a joke. There are certain subjects you don't joke about. You don't joke about comparing the elected president of the United States to Adolf Hitler. You just don't joke about that. It's not funny. It's historically inaccurate, and it will confuse a lot of people because people, when they read an op-ed in the New York Times, a lot of people without a sense of humor will say, "Oh, yeah, there's this comparison. I mean, look at what Trump's doing to people. He's actually what he's making them go to El Salvador if they're not citizens of the United States, where they're not sent to the maximum security prison. They're sent to a minimum security prison, like the guy from Maryland." Uh, but it just gets people thinking that what Hitler did isn't that bad because what Trump is doing is not that bad. And anybody who thinks that Trump is doing things that endanger democracy, are just dead wrong. He's challenging the power of the courts. Yes, he's expanding the power of the executive, much the way Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Delano Roosevelt did. Many of you don't like him, but the majority of Americans voted for him, or a plurality of Americans voted for him. He's not going to run for a third term. Hitler didn't run for anything after his first term. He was just the Der Fuhrer, the dictator. Trump's not going to do that. He's joking about it. And if he didn't joke about it, and if he wanted to do it, he'd be slapped down by the Supreme Court, by the Constitution, and ultimately by the voters. The voters would not vote for a third term for somebody who ran in violation of an amendment to the Constitution. So these analogies are they're just so absurd, just so absurd that I don't know what got into Larry David's mind. I mean, talk about people who are afflicted with a Trump derangement syndrome, and boy, number one on that list is Larry David. I mean, if Trump were to develop a cure for cancer, Larry David would say it was based on plagiarism or based on unethical use of materials and of scientific research. I mean, there's nothing that Trump could do which is right, and there's nothing that Bill Maher can do or Alan Dershowitz can do that in any way defends and humanizes Trump. That's acceptable. So it's that's where we're going. That's where we're going. We're going into a society in which people just see everything as black and white, everything as blue and red in this case, everything as either or. We can't appreciate that, maybe there is something that the Republicans are doing that's right, and maybe there's something the Democrats that are doing that's wrong. Well, we know there's many things the Democrats that are doing are wrong, but we don't know about the Republicans. So I worry about us. We're not in a constitutional crisis. We're in a constitutional conflict. The constitutional conflict has a way of being resolved under the Constitution. So we'll proceed. Now, I have to tell you, I was rushed tonight because I was on something else. And so normally my wife gathers the letters that you send me and puts them in front of me, and I have a chance to read them. I'm looking around, I can't find my letters. So I'm going to have to take a 1-minute pause and see if my wonderful wife, Carolyn, has the letters. So excuse me a second. Carolyn, I don't have letters and I'm in the middle of the show. Can you give me them right now?
Where did you put them?
I don't know. I haven't touched them.
See them?
I'm in the middle of the show, so just give them to me. and I will read some of them. See, we're really spontaneous. My wonderful wife, Carolyn, is passing by, who got me my letters. Now, I haven't had a chance to go over them, but I'll just read them randomly. Okay. Professor Dershowitz, it's been so fulfilling for me to see your views becoming so logical on political issues during the last couple of years. No. My views have not changed. I am boringly consistent. The world outside has changed, but you cannot find anything in my philosophy, in my legal philosophy, in my political philosophy, in my religious philosophy, in my moral philosophy that's changed. It's just not. Maybe someday the world around me will change again, and you won't like me, even though my views will be the same. So, what's been constant has been my philosophies. What's been different is how it applies. My philosophy used to come down largely in favor of libertarian, liberal, yes, Democrats. Today, the Democrats have abandoned me the way they abandoned Ronald Reagan. And so I've become much more acceptable to some moderate Republicans than I am to the diminishing number of moderate Democrats. Okay. Oh, this is an interesting one. We need to stop educating our enemies. That's a theme that I've seen through a number of the letters. Why do we accept exchange students from countries that want their students to come here to help them develop methods, weapons to use against us? Because we claim education is neutral, and we're not teaching them how to weaponize physics or science. We're just teaching them basic science, then them going back home and using it against us. I mean, that's not the first time that's happened. German scientists learned a lot in the 1920s when they came to the United States. And by the way, American scientists, those who helped develop the atomic bomb, which helped us win the Second World War, many of them were educated in Germany and other European countries. So ideas and knowledge don't recognize borders, and so I think we have to. But I would impose rigorous standards. I would not accept into American universities students who want to destroy America, who overtly want to destroy America, who want to destroy America's allies. I think we have the right to decide who we admit to this country and how we deal with them when they're in this country, and engage in the kind of conduct that was engaged in after October 7th. Let's see. This is interesting. This is thank Chaim Solomon for the freedoms we enjoy today. Not very many people know who Chaim Solomon was. Chaim Solomon was a merchant in New York City and Jewish, and he helped fund the American Revolution. He worked very hard, and he gave his money to George Washington, American troops, and congressional this and that, and is regarded as one of the heroes, not a founding father, but one of the heroes of the American Revolution. Died poverty-stricken in Philadelphia, had no money by the end of his life because he had basically spent it all on helping America revolt against British colonialism. Let's see. Harvard should never have been getting federal money. That's how we got $37 trillion in debt. No, I don't agree with that. I think it's okay for researchers, for people who are on the forefront of trying to help humanity, to get research grants, but I don't think they have to come through the university. University takes a tremendous amount of it for overhead, but more importantly, it then decides how to allocate the funds it gets, and it allocates it to institutions like the Carr Center at Harvard Law School, which is an evil institution that foments anti-Semitism, anti-Americanism, anti-intellectualism, and unfairness, and is open largely to the enemies of America and Israel to study and speak and influence students. So I don't think the Carr Center or places like that, and they exist all over the country, should be getting federal funding at all. What we need is targeted funding and targeted defunding. So to my question, Harvard, defend or defund? Both. I would defend Harvard's right to have scholars doing very expensive research that couldn't be done privately financed, although drug companies do privately finance their research. And at the same time, I would defund these political institutions that Harvard encourages and funds, and that cause so many of the problems. I would wonder if you did a research and you found out how many of the anti-Israel attacks on October 8th, before Israel sent any troops into Gaza, were encouraged and fomented by these departments, these queer studies departments, these transgender studies departments. I think I saw on television the other day a big protest movement where a transgender woman is standing up and saying, you cannot support transgender rights unless you support Palestinian rights. Transgender rights and Palestinian rights go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Well, yes, you can. And what's the best proof? The best proof is that all the countries that are supported by those who support Palestinian rights or against Israel rights hate transgenders. They murder them. They kill them. What do you think happens to a transgender person in Iran or in Gaza or in other places that these folks support? So this notion of intersectionality, that you can't support transgender rights or gay rights unless you're willing to become an anti-Semite, is just is typical of the times today. But that's what we're seeing. I saw it yesterday on CNN. It must be true because I saw it on CNN. I have a shirt that says something like that. Is it true, or did I see it on CNN? But this one I actually saw with my own eyes. I saw the transgender woman standing up there and saying, you can't support transgender rights unless you oppose Israel. And no, that's just not right. And if it were right, then many of us couldn't support transgender rights. If you condition us supporting the environment, transgender rights, gay rights, women's rights, black rights, if you condition that on opposing Israel, then those of us who support Israel can't support your causes. So which way would you have it? I think they're willing to cut us off completely. What happened today, if a Jewish kid or a Zionist kid on a university campus tries to join an organization that supports these rights, they're not allowed in. Berkeley, a state university, I think 13 of its clubs have said you can't speak at our club if you're a Zionist, even if you support the environment, even if you support women's rights. If you're a Zionist, you're excluded. How is that different from saying if you believe in black equality, you can be excluded? Would any court permit a state university to pay for clubs that condition speaking at the club on opposing black equality? Well, what is Zionism? Zionism is equality for the Jewish people. It's equality for the nation state of the Jewish people. The argument for the Palestinians is that their land was stolen, but that was 77 years ago. So it boils down to how long before we forget that. Remember, the Israelites had that land before it changed approximately 2,000 years ago. But we forget, too, that between the 2,000 years ago, between the time of Christ and the time Israel was established in 1948, Israel always had a Jewish population. There were always people, majority of Jerusalem was Jewish. The majority of Hebron was Jewish. The majority of Safat was Jewish. Tel Aviv was always Jewish. It was a Jewish city founded by Jews. So it's not as if they just suddenly came back to the land in 1948 that they had been out of for 2,000 years. There's been a continuous Jewish presence in what the Romans called Palestine for 2,000 years. So, Zionism is not colonialism. It's anti-colonialism. Lawyers follow the example of John Adams, good moral clarity. John Adams wasn't perfect. He supported the Alien and Sedition Acts. By the way, the Alien Acts are the acts that are being used today, partly, to deport people who are aliens, and the Supreme Court is going to have to decide that case, whether the Alien Act of 1798 applies without there being a war. It's going to be an interesting case, but the important thing is whichever way it comes out, President Trump is going to follow it. He's not going to defy the Supreme Court. There's no evidence of that. He's said the opposite. So let's give him a chance to defuse any kind of a constitutional crisis. Okay, this is a good question. If the government ends all funding except research at universities, how will the government penalize a university that discriminates against Jews? Very simple. It applies the Bob Jones test. Bob Jones is a Christian university that discriminated against gays, and their tax exemption was eliminated, and the Supreme Court supported that. So, there are various kinds of pressures that can be placed on universities other than funding of cancer research. You can take away their tax exemption for certain activities, and you can also limit the people who come and have student visas and pay these enormous tuitions to Harvard. So, here's what that says. How about this for a principle? Federal government should not be giving money to rich people's universities. No, it's a good point. That's why I'm in favor of the money going directly to the researchers and having experts, objective, neutral, non-political experts, decide who gets the funding, and it has to be in the public interest. And I would not only defund universities, I would defund National Public Radio, National Public Television, the federal government, and those two, by the way, National Public Radio is a rich person's activity. The demographics of people who watch NPR and TV, public television, tends to be on the richer side. They can afford to pay their $2 a month to help support that. We don't need the federal government doing that. We don't want the federal government telling NPR what it can say and what it can't say, and or doing anything that in any way interferes with free speech and basic fundamental rights. Okay. I guess I must have gotten 100 emails. I'm just looking through them now. Again, I apologize for not having done this before. Many of them just say Harvard's too rich to be getting federal money. Let's give federal money to poor people who really need it to live, not who need it to promote programs of gay rights and queer rights and transgender rights. That can be funded by individual people who support those policies. And don't ask me to support transgender rights if you condition that on me not supporting the right of the Jewish people to live in the land of Israel. So, so your student, Congressman Jamie Raskin, not nice things about that. But Jamie and I have been at each other's throats since the day he came to my class. He was always opposing my points of view, and that's great. I love when students present different points of view. And so I'm very proud of Jamie Raskin. I'm very proud of Ted Cruz. I'm very proud of Elena Kagan, and and of Mike Pompeo, who was my student, and so many others who are my students. I taught over 10,000 students in 50 years of active teaching at Harvard, and so I hope my students will go on to do great things, whether they agree with me or disagree with me. Tomorrow, the real truth, what's really going on between Harvard and other elite Ivy League universities and the Trump administration. You will be shocked to learn the real truth. See you tomorrow.